Good afternoon. I hope that you have had a good time, that you enjoyed your weekend and you had a time to rest. Now, our Zoom sessions are running for 40 minutes because it's a free version, right? So after every 40 minutes, we're going to create another. We're going to create another session so that the class can continue. Today, I want us to discuss sampling. I want us to discuss sampling and therefore see what sampling is about. So here are the notes. So personally, I'll just be introducing you to concepts. I'll be telling you what every concept is about. So let's start off the class by first defining a sample. A sample. Now, a sample is a small unit that represents a whole item. A sample is a small unit that represents a whole item. When that small unit is studied, the findings that are drawn from that small unit are also concluded for the rest of the larger item. For instance, if you go to the hospital and they want to test if your blood is infected by a certain bacteria or virus, they will take out a sample of your blood. They test that sample, and then if they find bacteria in that sample, they will then generally conclude that your whole blood is infected by that bacteria. Therefore, a sample is a small unit that represents the whole. The findings that are drawn from the sample are coherent and conclusive for the rest of the unit. So in research, you also have samples. It can be a collection of people that you choose from a general population, so that you can, these particular ones that you've chosen, you ask them questions, and then whatever findings you get from those particular people you've chosen, then those findings you can conclude those findings also concerning the rest of the population. So a sample is a small unit that represents the whole. In research, you can say that a sample is a small unit of an item or a people in a population that represents the whole in the rest of the population. Okay, so what is sampling? Sampling is the systematic activity of collecting samples. Sampling is the systematic activity of collecting samples. So from the word sample, sampling is the process of collecting samples. All right, now there are then the other term is a sample design. Okay, a sample design. A sample design is basically a definite plan for obtaining a sample from a given population. It is a plan that you use when you are sampling. Okay, because there is a process of sampling. All right, we are going to look at the process of sampling. So that process of sampling is called the sample design. Just as we had research design, you remember research design is a plan that shows or that guides the researcher on how to perform the research, on how to conduct different activities during the research. So just as a research design is a plan, a sample design is a plan. All right, it is a plan for how you are going to select your sample. All right, now the first thing to know when you are creating a sample design is that there are some concepts that are associated to it, and those concepts are the ones that are going to guide how you plan for your sampling. All right, for instance, if you see the topic after this is the another topic. I believe that you know that, right? This chapter 4. Okay, because we had introduction, then we had research problem, we had some research design, and now we had sampling design, which is chapter 5. I'm sorry. So after this topic, we are going to do data collection. So that is why all these topics are arranged in that manner. because after sampling, the next thing you do is go and perform data collection. So if you want to go out and give people questionnaires to answer some particular questions related to your subject of study, then you cannot, if it is a big population, if you are wanting to research something like, let's say, you are having a research on what the impact of COVID-19 on e-commerce, or the impact of COVID-19 on online buying and selling. Now you see, there is a very big population that does online commerce. Okay, there is a very big population that buys and sells things online. So you cannot ask everybody. All right, so you can pick select people and select particular people who can answer your question. So you want to get a sample of those people. Okay, so therefore, for you to get a sample of those people, then you have to follow some specific things, and also you have to consider some specific things. And that's why we are talking about the steps in sample design. What should you do as you plan to go out and choose a sample of people you want to give questionnaires in the case of that particular subject that I've given you? Okay, so what should you consider before, as you plan to go out and pick a sample? The first one is to consider the type of universe. Okay, now the universe is basically, it can be a population of a city, all right, such kind of things. The universe, when we are talking about the universe, we are basically talking about the particular whole item that must be represented. Okay, the particular whole item that must be represented. For instance, if you are doing that research on, online buying and selling, most people that do online buying and selling are people that live in town, all right? Because of course, Jumia, Kilimall, they do not deliver outside town. They deliver just within the town and its environs, right? So many people who do online buying and selling, they do it within town or in the suburbs of town, all right? So the universe is basically the region from where the sample will be collected. It is the regions which are related to that subject. Okay, the regions or the places, or the particular area that is related to that sample, that will have that sample that you need. Okay, so if you need for online, of course, you are going to get samples from people who work or live in town. Okay, so the universe can be divided into two. There is a finite universe. There's a finite universe, and there is an infinite universe. A finite universe is one that contains a population that you can count. So universe is basically population. Okay, finite universe is a population that you can count. All right, that has a quantitative value, like the population of a city, or the number of students in a school. If you are doing your research in a school, right? Okay, so if you're doing your research in different schools, okay, if there are different schools that are affected in the area of research, if you are doing a research on, probably, let's talk about the impact of HIV and AIDS in in colleges and campuses in Kenya. So colleges and campuses in Kenya is your universe. These are the areas that will have your potential samples. Okay, so you see all those campuses, they have a number of students, and therefore having a number of students, it means you can actually count them. Of course, you may not go and count all of them, but you may take an estimate, probably from the internet. You may take a quantitative value, like there are probably say 800,000 students in college and campus in the year 2020, or you can talk about 2 million or 1,500,000 students in colleges and campuses in Kenya. So when you define that, that is a finite universe. Okay, then what is an infinite universe? An infinite universe is a population that contains items that you cannot quantify or that you cannot count in number. For instance, if you are doing a research on soil, like you want to do a study of a particular soil, why does it not allow crops to grow there? All right, then you go and pick a sample of that soil from that region. Now, that particular area, that contains the population. What is the population? The population is the soil itself is an infinite universe. Why? Because that population cannot be counted. You cannot count soil, right? You cannot count. You can only measure, but you cannot count. All right. You cannot really say that you picked, for instance, you cannot really say that you picked 400 grams out of 6,000 tons of soil. You cannot say that, because how can you measure soil? You cannot measure the amount of soil that is within that area. All right. It is not, you are not able. All right. You are not able to measure. So that is what is called an infinite universe. So if you are doing a you know, research on, you know, the impact of waste, the impact of waste on our rivers, the impact of, you know, improper waste disposal on the rivers in Kenya. So you cannot quantify how much liters of water, or, you know, how much liters of water flow in our rivers. You cannot count, all right? You cannot even measure. Yeah, you cannot even measure, because there's no way to do that. There's no practical way to do that. So when you go and pick samples from a river that has been infected by a lot of waste, you pick sample from a sample of water, unaweka kwa mkebe, a sample of water unaweka kwa mkebe, and such kind of a thing. You can actually measure what you've taken. You can say, I've taken 400 milliliters of water, or 400 milliliters of water, something like that. But the universe itself, the population is what? The rivers. You cannot measure. All right? You cannot measure. That's an infinite universe. Are we together? So the universe is basically the population which contains the samples, the potential samples. Okay. Then what is the sampling unit? The sampling unit is the specific area of the universe that you go to pick your samples. All right. It is the specific area. It's a specific geographical area where you go to pick your samples. Basically, the sampling unit is part of the larger universe. For instance, if you are doing a research on the impact of HIV and AIDS in, or the spread and impact of HIV and AIDS in colleges and campuses in Kenya. Colleges and campuses in Kenya is the universe, okay? But if you want to do your case study from one particular campus, because you cannot at all do a research on all the, how many campuses do we have in Kenya? More than 100. Yeah. There are more than 100 campuses in Kenya, and some are very far. So you may want to pick like one. So that particular geographical place, that particular geographical school or campus that you pick, where now you'll decide now that is where you're going to go and pick your samples, then that school is what is called the sampling unit. Okay. If you're doing a research on the impact of improper waste disposal on our rivers in Kenya, you want to see how much rivers have been contaminated and infected with bacteria in Kenya, then you'll realize that you cannot, there are very many rivers in Kenya. So what you'll do, you're going to pick only one river or two where you're going to pick your sample. So you can go to Tana River, or you can go to Nairobi River, right? And pick a sample from there, pick a sample from Nairobi River, you label, pick a sample from Tana River, you label, pick a sample from Athi River, you label. And so you have the samples. So basically, those particular rivers you picked samples from are the sampling units. So the sampling units are the particular geographical areas where you pick your samples from. And therefore, the sampling unit is part of the larger universe, which you cannot do a research of. You cannot do a research of the whole universe, okay? You only do a research from a sampling unit, okay? Then what is a source list? A source list is also called a sampling frame. A source list normally is associated with a finite universe. And what is it? A source list is a list of the names of the items in that sampling unit is a list of the names of the items in that sampling unit. And again, I repeat, it is associated with a finite universe, not an infinite, a finite universe. So let's have an example. You've decided you're going to do a research on the impact of HIV and AIDS in campuses, and you choose ZTech University to be your, so colleges and campuses in Kenya is a universe, but you choose your case study to be ZTech University. Therefore, ZTech University is one of the among the colleges in the universe, which now becomes your sampling unit. All right. So before you pick a sample from ZTech University, students, teachers, non-teaching staff, those kind of things, before you pick samples from the different groups in that particular sampling unit, in that particular geographical area, which is the, ZTech University, you have to create a list of all the names of all the items. But of course, items here are people. All right. So items is just a general term. So the list of all the names of all the items, and in this case, people. Students, you have a list of all of them. Teachers, a list of all of them. Non-teaching, a list of all of them, if non-teaching and teaching will be included in the research. If you want just a research that is associated more with the students, then we'll just have a list of all the students. Okay, so that list is called a source list. Now, what is the importance of a source list? The importance of a source list is to know how to pick your samples, how to distribute your selection of samples, how to distribute your selection of samples. So that, for instance, this ZTech University, so you'll pick students and you'll find there are students from different courses. So that you do not have a biased sample. A biased sample is one which has considered only one particular section of group. Therefore, because you have a list that contains all students according to their, you can group them according to gender, you can group them according to age, you can group them according to year of admission, you can group them according to department. It depends on how you want to pick your sample. So for instance, if you want to pick your samples from departments, then you're going to have a source list that has been arranged to a number of students according to the departments they belong to. Okay, so why is that important? A source list is important because it helps you to distribute your collection of samples. So then when you begin to collect samples, you're going to collect now, in this case, from each department. You can pick 10. If this department contains 100 students, you can pick 10. If the other department contains 57 students, you can pick 6 or 5 or 10 still. If the other department contains 80 students, you can pick 8. Yeah. If the other department contains 90 students, you can pick 9. So you'll have all those samples. So 8 plus 9 plus 10 plus the other. That will be your sample. Now you see, you have distributed your collection of samples. You've not just collected your sample from one particular department. Okay. So that is the importance of a source list. A source list enables you to distribute your collection of samples. Hence, you will have a more reliable sample that is not biased. Okay, you will not have picked a sample from probably IT department only. Yeah, and probably IT department may not be having very, very, notable cases of HIV and AIDS, right? So you may pick a biased sample which may give you unreliable data. But if you pick samples from different departments, then you are likely to have samples that can give you more accurate information because it is distributed across the whole sampling unit. Okay, it is distributed across the whole sampling unit. Then what is the size of sample? The size of sample is the number or the amount of sample you pick from the source list. All right, so that is what I was saying. If now from your source list you have arranged the number of students, all of them according to department, and therefore you pick 10 from ICT department, 10 from business department, 6 from engineering department, 20 from hospitality, and just like that, when you bring all those samples together that you've picked from the different departments, then that forms your sample size. So your sample size is the total number of samples or total amount. If you're talking about an infinite universe, we talk about amount. Total amount of sample or total number, if you're talking about a finite universe, total number or total amount of sample that you've picked out of the whole sampling unit. So you may find that if CTech University has, let's say, 2,000 students, you have picked a sample of 150. That all of them, 150, each of them come from uniquely different departments from the source list. Okay, so 150 is your sample size. Okay, now what should determine the sample size? What should determine the sample size? Number one, the sample size is determined by the source list, the amount of items. Let's talk about a finite universe, like in a school, people that you can count. A number and the general population of the sampling unit, that will determine the sample size. The larger the sampling unit, the larger the sample. So you cannot have 2,000 members in a particular sampling unit like in ZTech University and then pick just 2 people. 2 is not enough. 2 will not guarantee reliability of data, because these 2, there will be things that they may not know or answer. You have to pick a larger. So if you are dealing with, for instance, 5 people, you may pick a sample of 2 or even 1. Okay, because what 5 experience, also this 1 experience, likely experiences. So if you are having a department, you're just doing a research in a department level, just a research in a department level, and that research is geared to finding out something related to the staff, not the students. Okay, in one particular department, and you may just, probably a department, you may have just 6 members, so you can pick 2, right, or even 1. Okay, and that 1 can actually you can even pick 2, probably because of gender bias, right? Pick 2, yeah. And if they are all men or if they are all women, you just pick 1, or yeah, just 1. If there are 5, pick 1. As in, the sampling unit is primarily what determines the size of the sample. Okay, the more the number in the source list, the greater the population of the sampling unit, the more the number in the source list. Therefore, the greater the sample size. All right. Yeah. So why would you do that? Because of reliability of data. If you have a very small sample for a very big population, your data is bound to be unreliable. Your findings are bound to be unreliable. If you are having a big sample size for a very, very small sampling unit, like you have 100 and you pick 70, that is an exaggerated sample size. Okay, if you have 100 in a source list and you pick 70 out of that source list to be your sample, people are going to help you answer some questions. That is a very, very big sample. It's a very exaggerated sample. And what that will do, it will waste a lot of your time in data collection and data analysis. And also it's unnecessary. It lengthens the time of research. All right. It lengthens the time of research unnecessarily. So basically, your source list should be the determinant of your sample size. Okay, so normally pick, if it is 20, pick 5. What is 5 out of 20? That is a quarter. If it is 2,000, pick 200. All right, that is a quarter. At least a quarter can do. All right, or even a fifth can do. All right, if you have 100, a quarter of 100 is what? 25, which is still big. You can still pick 15 or 20. In other words, it should be something, a fifth or a quarter, depending on the fifth or a quarter, depending on the sampling unit. Also, the size of the sample should also be determined by the intensity of the subject. There are subjects where you may want to pick more people because you do not know how each of them is going to respond, because it's probably an intense subject. Like if you are dealing with HIV and AIDS, you're dealing with an intense subject, all right? So pick more, because some may give you unreliable data for fear of what? The confidentiality issues, for fear of being exposed. People want to remain anonymous. So pick more people so that you can collect more data, because in intense subjects, some people may want to lie, some people may want to hide some information because of personal reasons. Okay, so pick more people so that among the more people that you pick, there are those who will give you what? Reliable data. Okay. Yes, and of course, apart among those who will give you unreliable, there will be those who give you reliable data. So the sample size should be determined by the sampling unit or the source list. In other words, the number, the amount of population, and also the subject at hand, the subject you are dealing with. Then parameters of interest. Parameters of interest are the particular groups in that particular sample size that we are more interested in, particular groups that we are more interested in. For instance, if you're doing a research on a particular disease in a hospital, or cancer-related patients, you're doing a research which is going to involve cancer-related patients, probably you want to really focus on people that have been dealing with, breast cancer. Yeah. So breast cancer patients or victims are going to be your parameters of interest. All right. Parameters of interest are the specific groups within your sample that you are more interested in, and you might well want to take more time with during your research. Okay. So as you continue to interview or interview cancer patients, you may want to interview more the breast cancer patients. They are your parameters of interest, and normally parameter of interest is normally influenced by the information you get during your data collection. Like you might be getting data, gathering data as you when you have picked your samples and you begin to interview those people that form your sample, begin to interview them, you realize that there is some specific information that breast cancer patients give that all the other patients do not give, and you deem that set of information the breast cancer patients are giving important. So you may want to, generally, as you go down your data collection procedure, you want to narrow down to, not really narrowing down, but give more attention to the breast cancer patients because of that particular information they are giving. All right, parameters of interest. All right. Then, of course, when you are preparing your sample design, you have to look at the budgetary constraint. How much money are you going to spend? Why? Because a research is budget bound. For you to collect a sample, there is going to be budget expenses. Why? Because, for instance, if it's questionnaires you'll be giving out, if you have 2,000 in a sampling unit or in a source list, and you pick 1,000 as your sample, how many questionnaires are you going to print? 1,000. Probably one questionnaire has 2 pages. So 1,000, and so 1,000 times 2,000, and printing each page is 3 shillings. 2,000 times 3, 6,000 shillings. And then you carry a pen, because most people, when you carry questionnaires, by the way, when you go out to do your research, and you determine to give people questionnaires, please ensure that you carry pens. People are more encouraged to answer. All right. When you give them pens and you actually leave them with those pens to be theirs, the pen can be written the name of the organization that is sponsoring the research. It really helps them. It's like when you are filling a form for flight services. If you've been a regular flight passenger of a particular company, a flight company, normally if you are filling a form to answer some questions about your flight services and all that, they will give you a pen that belongs to that. So they will give you a pen belonging to Emirates, or a pen belonging to Kenya Airways, or Ethiopian Airlines, or Turkey Airlines. Yeah, such things. So they give you a pen. Basically what that does is just it encourages the person answering the questions to do what? To answer, because, well, I get something out of it. That's basically the idea. Okay. And even there are people who, if you are doing a very intense subject, you might want to pay them to give you that information. All right. For instance, if you are doing a research on drug lords, not very many people may come out with the information about who sells what, who does particular transactions. But if you pay people, they can actually give you information. All right. You know, money drives everything. So there's that. So if you want to interview people, you might want to give people some money if it's something that, you know, yeah. Or even for instance, if you go to, if you go to what? If you are invited for an interview, there are those what you call expert interviews. Expert interviews are those which uh, we want to get something from experts, information from experts. So we can get political analysts to come and to KTN or NTV, those kind of people that are normally invited to TV for interviews. They are asked questions and people can call in or send their questions and therefore they can answer. Those kinds of people, after that, they are normally given a honorarium. A honorarium is basically an amount of money. It can be a package or even a gift that they are given because of basically coming in and giving crucial information that is very, very important for the general public. So when you go to a TV, when you're invited to a TV or a radio, sometimes there are those radios and TVs that most of them, if it is an expert interview, they will give you a honorarium, right? A honorarium. Why? Because by coming in to give information during the interview, many people are watching in, all right? So as many people are watching in, of course, the TV or the company is running adverts. So they are making money. So after that interview, because people are watching you, then they will give you a honorarium. All right. So there is that budget. So because they picked you as a sample from all the political analysts, they picked probably 3 of them. Those 3, they will be given a honorarium. And so that honorarium has to be budgeted. All right. So there's that budgetary constraint. Okay. Cost considerations when you are picking a sample. Okay. Then sampling procedure is basically the steps he or she, the researcher, is going to use when picking a sample. The sampling procedure. So basically the sampling procedure is explained below. And we are going to discuss the sampling procedure. I can see the, our time is running out. We have less than 2 minutes. So I can see our time is running out. So we are going to look at the sampling procedure. How do we make the sample? How do we now collect the sample? We have now determined the universe. We have determined the sampling unit. We've determined the source list. We have determined the sample size. We have also determined, okay, after determining the sample size, okay, how much money is it going to cost us to handle this sample we have collected? If it's 2,000, out of 2,000, we have collected 200. How much money are we going to spend to collect data from these 200 individuals? Budgetary constraint, right? And then after determining that, now we go out to actually pick the sample practically, all right, to choose the sample. So now we are going to come back and discuss the procedure for collecting the sample. Okay, so what these were considerations for the sample design. Okay, considerations for the sample design. Yeah, the sample design is a plan for your sample. So considerations you have to make as you plan the sample. Where am I going to pick the sample from? Which population is associated to that research? That's the universe, the population. Which particular geographical area am I going to focus my sampling? Which particular geographical area am I going to pick my sample from? That's the sampling unit. What is the names of the items and people that I'm going to be researching on? The names, the list, they have to be divided according to a certain criteria as well. That's the source list. Then from the source list, you determine the number of sample, the amount of sample you're going to pick from the source list. E.g., you can pick 10 from ICT department. Your source list has students divided into different departments. 10 from ICT, 10 from engineering, 10 from hospitality, 20 from media, something like that. Then parameters of interest are the particular groups that you think you will want to be interested in when the data collection begins, after you collect your sample. And of course, after doing that, look at how much money you're going to spend on the sample. like if it's an expert interview, how much honorarium you're going to give people, and also now write down an outline of the procedure to use when collecting that sample. So our session ends. Let me create another session so that now we can look at how the procedure for collecting a sample.